Hey y'all, wanted to do a post about everybody's least favorite virus, RSV. If you have little kids, infant kids in particular, it oftentimes is the dreaded RSV. So I wanted to give a doctor's inside information kind of aspect to RSV and how to care for it and all that kind of stuff. So RSV is a incredibly common and incredibly contagious respiratory virus that usually, most commonly, is a wintertime problem. During COVID, it seemed to pop up at other times of year, but generally it's confined to kind of Thanksgiving to spring break, maybe. It actually causes a illness called bronchiolitis. Not bronchitis, but bronchiolitis, which can be caused by a bunch of different viruses. So it is possible to have bronchiolitis without having RSV. There are lots of other viruses out there that can cause it, but RSV is the most common viral cause of it. It causes a ton of inflammation in the lungs. And because of the narrowness of little kids' airways, a little bit of mucus goes a long way to causing lots of difficulty in little infants and younger kids than it does in older kids and adults. So older kids and adults generally are just going to have a cold with maybe a little bit more coughing than they normally have, particularly if they have like an asthma type tendency or something like that. It can also be a big-time problem for elderly, geriatric, nursing home type age as well. So it really is a big problem for the littlest and the biggest, or the youngest and the oldest. It's extremely common in daycares in particular, and if one kid is there for any significant length of time when they're coughing, it's inevitable that every child in the room is going to get it. And it's most problematic for, say, kids less than 9 months of age. But, a 2-month-old's more effective than a 9-month-old generally. And then there's the occasional 2-year-old that ends up in the hospital with it for whatever reason. So it's a little bit unpredictable, but it is fairly predictable in that younger kids have a tougher time than older kids. Symptoms are plus or minus fever. Some kids have 102 fever or so it can kind of look like the flu sometimes. My granddaughter right now has it and had 102 with it. But most kids don't have fever, it seems like to me. And it's more of a profuse runny nose and a cough, 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 cough. I can hear it down the hallway when they're bringing somebody in with it because it's just such a classic cough. So lots of runny nose, lots of coughing. Frequently they have ear infections along with it. And of course all of the, they don't want to eat right, and they don't want to sleep because they're coughing so much and all that kind of stuff. In its worst form, it causes some respiratory distress, which is some difficulty breathing, faster breathing, retractions, which are sucking in between the ribs or above the clavicles here, above the collarbones, or abdominal breathing and retracting around the bottom of the ribs. Most little infants, pretty much all of them have some degree of that going on. Retractions is not the end of the world because it's just kind of a normal thing, and their chest walls are flexible. But it, in some kids, not the majority by any stretch, but in some kids it causes a lot more inflammation and a lot more trouble than in other kids. So I think about it as like an iceberg where only 10% of the iceberg is sticking above the water. The other 90% is below the water. Well, the same thing is true with RSV, that, 90% of kids do, relatively fine with a lot of coughing and sleepless nights, etc. And then 10% or so, I don't know what the exact number is, but there's a percentage of kids that end up in the hospital. Now, kids that end up in the hospital because they're having difficulty breathing, and so they need some oxygen to get them through it until it passes, as well as they can't eat because they're too busy breathing, so they can get dehydrated. So even if you end up in the hospital, you just get IV fluids and some oxygen. So generally, antibiotics are not used, breathing treatments are not used, steroids are not used. And we've tried all of those things over the years, but they just do not help. The studies show that nothing in an ordinary case helps. Now, some kids that have asthma histories or that kind of thing, breathing treatments and steroids and that kind of stuff might be indicated. But for the average little infant baby that catches it at daycare, there is no treatment for it. You just have to kind of let it run its course, run a cool mist humidifier, suction the nose. Cough medicines don't really do anything of significance, but they might help your kid sleep a little bit or something like that. So some people do that. But generally, it's a humidifier and hanging in there until it runs its course. There are certainly kids that have a much harder time. So kids with significant lung or heart issues are the worst victims of it. Extreme prematurity, or prematurity in general, but extreme prematurity with some sort of lung damage really sets you up to have a struggle with it. So there are certain cases. There is an RSV vaccine out there now that's actually monoclonal antibodies that prevents it. It doesn't 100% prevent it in all kids, but it does a really good job of keeping kids out of the hospital. So it's not a vaccine like we typically think of as vaccines, in that your body doesn't make the antibodies. The antibodies are made in a machine somewhere, and then you get a shot that you can give it. We give it at the 2-week checkup sometimes. We give it 2 months. Depending on what time of year it is and how old the kid is, it can be given anytime under 9 months of age. So that's the story on RSV. It's a nuisance problem for the vast majority of people, but it can be a big deal, and so we really do like to avoid it. We're hopeful that the RSV vaccine will be a game changer and keep those hospitals from filling up in the wintertime with all these kids with RSV. And I wanted to add on a little bit to the end of that about RSV, because RSV also can have a residual cough that can last for weeks, if not months, seemingly, for a lot of kids. It will, in a lot of kids, really seem like they're going back to having active RSV over and over again through the wintertime. And it is also associated with asthma and wheezing down the line. So there are lots of reasons that we want to avoid it, and we would like to prevent it. If you're liking what I am putting out, please subscribe, and hopefully y'all can stay away from RSV.